November 1803. Winter was descending upon Britain, and with winter comes the ghosts. As the natural world withered and died under a blanket of frost, all manner of spirits, ghosts, and demons were believed to grow active. In the communities that surrounded London, rumors were spreading that one such phantom had taken hold in the town of Hammersmith. The ghost was described as a tall man dressed all in white. Residents claimed that it was the ghost of a man who had taken his own life, yet was buried in the churchyard. At the time, it was believed that such individuals should not be buried in consecrated ground. The assumption was that they would never be able to rest. But now, sightings of the ghost were on the rise. Several people claimed to have seen him lurking through the streets of Hammersmith with their own eyes. But this spectral story soon materialized in the physical plane, as the sightings took a deadly turn. Today, we're going to examine the history of the Hammersmith Ghost Trial, which would have a far-reaching impact on British law. I'm Nicole Miras, and this is Fireside Fables. The Hammersmith Ghost is a fascinating case study because it blends the supernatural and folklore with real legal consequences. The story begins in November 1803 and stretches into the winter of the following year. And winter was a time for ghost stories, especially during the Christmas season. I actually shared a video on that topic this past December. Today, we associate ghosts and ghouls with October thanks to the overwhelming commercial success of Halloween, particularly in the States. But prior to the 20th century, winter was actually seen as the ideal time to spot a ghost. By the way, if you love learning about ghost stories, folklore, and strange events from history, then you should absolutely subscribe to Fireside Fables. Liking and subscribing makes a big difference, and it helps me to find other curious, like-minded viewers. Today, I am drinking a delicious cup of green tea, so pour yourself something amazing and let's get into it. At first, sightings of the Hammersmith ghost were just that. Sightings. Usually he was described as being dressed in all white, though in the ensuing murder trial, some witnesses described that they had heard stories of a man with horns dressed in calfskin. Sounds like a very high-end ghost. And this description is very similar to Spring-Heeled Jack, who would haunt London in future decades. As I mentioned earlier, some locals believed that the ghost was a spirit of a man who had taken his own life. Despite the fact that the Bible never explicitly condemned suicide as a sin, centuries of theological teachings interpreted the sixth commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," as encompassing this. Throughout the medieval period, as the church began formalizing burial practices and creating rules and structures about who could and could not be buried in consecrated ground, superstitions developed about those who in some way broke those taboos. One of those beliefs was the idea that a person who had taken his or her own life could not be buried in consecrated ground because they would never be at peace and their soul would haunt the surrounding community. As the new year grew closer, panic over the Hammersmith ghost was beginning to spiral. Some accounts claim that two women who encountered the ghost later died of shock. Now, these initial deaths were very much alleged. We don't know anything about these two women. We don't know if they even existed. In records from the trial, a man named Thomas Groom, who was an apprentice to a local brewer, did claim on the record that he had been attacked by the ghost. And he gave a very evocative description of this event. "I was going through the churchyard between 8 and 9 o'clock with my jacket under my arm and my hands in my pocket when some person came from behind a tombstone, which there are 4 square in the yard behind me, and caught me fast by the throat with both hands and held me fast. My fellow servant, who was going on before, hearing me scuffling, asked what was the matter. Then whatever it was gave me a twist round and I saw nothing. I gave a bit of a push out with my fist and felt something soft, like a greatcoat." Okay, now whether or not you believe in ghosts, clearly there is something weird going on in the town of Hammersmith. Maybe a local prankster trying to stir up fear for some reason. At this point, you're probably wondering, why was there a trial? Was the Hammersmith ghost ever caught? Was the spirit of a deceased person put on trial, like the ecclesiastical trial of Pope Formosus in 897? The ghost wasn't put on trial. but his killer was. By early January, night watchmen in the area were on high alert for the ghost. One of them, a man named William Girdler, claimed to have seen the ghost on the night of December 29th, but when he ran after it, it disappeared. With the local community terrified, armed citizens began volunteering as watchmen to increase the patrols at night. One of these citizens was a man named Francis Smith. Smith was a 29-year-old excise officer. On the night of January 3rd, between 10 and 11 p.m., Smith was patrolling the streets when he saw a figure standing at the corner of Beaver and Black Lion Lane. The shadowy figure was shrouded in white. It had to be the Hammersmith ghost. Smith raised his pistol and called to the figure. "Damn you, who are you and what are you?" he cried. "Damn you, I will shoot you." But before the ghost could respond, he fired. The man in white fell to the ground, and as Smith grew closer, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. The man he killed was, of course, no ghost. He was a bricklayer named Thomas Millwood. Bricklayers traditionally wore all-white clothing. As it was late at night and quite dark, Francis Smith tragically confused Millwood for the ghost. If you've ever wondered why it is that ghosts are traditionally depicted wearing white sheets, it's because prior to the Victorian period, only the wealthiest were buried in coffins. Most of the deceased were wrapped in a cloth called a burial shroud. This powerful imagery shaped how people saw ghosts for centuries and probably influenced Smith's confusion that night. Shortly after the killing, several night watchmen found Smith with Millwood's body. One was the same William Girdler who had claimed to be attacked by the ghost a week before. Thomas Millwood's sister Anne actually overheard the entire thing. The quotes we have of Smith talking to Millwood come from her testimony during the subsequent trial. Millwood's parents lived on Black Lion Lane, and what's especially devastating is that the reason he left at that precise moment is because they told him his wife shouldn't be home alone at that hour. Francis Smith was taken into custody, and the trial began the following week. When Millwood's wife took the stand, she told the court that due to his clothing, he had been confused for the ghost before. She had asked him to wear a coat over his white clothing so that such an incident wouldn't occur again, which of course it did. Throughout the trial, many residents of Hammersmith came forward to speak about Francis Smith's good character, that he wasn't predisposed to violence, that he didn't have a cruel or malicious character. But the chief judge, Lord Chief Baron Sir Archibald MacDonald, wasn't buying it. He reminded the jury that the accused hadn't been attacked or even threatened by the ghost. And even if Millwood had intentionally impersonated a ghost, which he didn't, that would be a misdemeanor, not a felony. MacDonald told the jury that if they believed the witnesses' testimonies, then Smith should be convicted of murder. The jury wavered on this. After all, Smith was convinced that he had seen a ghost, and hadn't many other witnesses claimed to have seen that ghost over the past several weeks? They felt a murder conviction was too harsh, and instead they came back with manslaughter. MacDonald told the jury that the court wouldn't accept that. Either Smith was guilty of murder or they would have to acquit him. The jury deliberated once again, and the court came back with their final verdict. Smith was guilty. But in the end, Francis Smith was spared execution. The trial, as you can expect, had received too much public attention, and there was that pesky question at the center of this case. From a legal perspective, did it matter that Smith genuinely believed he had seen a ghost? Of course, there's the irony here that a ghost can't be killed again, so presumably shooting it wouldn't actually do anything. In the end, his sentence was commuted to 1 year of hard labor. The legal question of what to do when a defendant acts on mistaken but sincerely held beliefs would haunt the UK courts for the next century. It wasn't until the 1980s that the matter was settled, when a case came up against a man who thought he was stopping a violent assault when, in fact, the alleged assaulter was stopping a thief. That case did not end in death, should be said. The court held that a person may rely on self-defense based on a mistaken belief, even if that belief is wrong, as long as it is honestly held. And what of the Hammersmith ghost? What about those prior incidents when people claimed to have seen him lurking around at night? Some accounts claim that the original Hammersmith ghost was a man named John Graham, a shoemaker who was trying to frighten his apprentice. That has not been verified, so we don't know for sure if that's true, or if maybe there were multiple people impersonating the ghost, or if a lot of it was just paranoia. We'll probably never know. And why would Graham want to scare his apprentice in the first place? If stories are to be believed, it's because Graham's apprentice was telling ghost stories that had frightened Graham's children. And like many a ghost before him, he was eager to seek his revenge. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and maybe even share it with a friend or two. Be well, and I'll see you next time.